Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 1 on tonight's agenda is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, November 16th, and recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 2 is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, November 30th. The recommendation is to receive those minutes, or to approve those minutes, I'm sorry.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor Robinson.
I'd just like the minutes to reflect item 812. That was meant to be a support and I registered opposition. I was completely confused. I thought we were voting on item 814 when I voted in opposition.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I believe that might be for the council meeting following?
No, I'm pretty sure it was this one. Maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, there would not have been motions at the public hearing, so it might be the next item for which we will.
Maybe you're right, it's the next meeting. I skipped a page. I apologize.
In raising the issue about the wrong item, you were on the wrong meeting.
I know. It happens.
It's okay. We're good. Any other questions about the minutes? Mr. Clerk?
Just the motion to approve those minutes has been moved and seconded but not voted on.
That's true. That's correct. Any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 3 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, November 30th, which was held immediately after the public hearing. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor Robinson.
Am I on the right item? This was the item. Thank you.
We'll move the minutes as amended.
As amended, it was the correct date, just the subsequent meeting. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4 is the minutes of the Strategic Priorities Administration Protective Services Standing Committee meeting held Monday, November 9th. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 5 is the minutes of the Strategic Priorities Administration Protective Services Standing Committee meeting held Monday, November 10th. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Move receipt.
Second. Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 6 is the minutes of the Strategic Priorities Administration Protective Services Standing Committee meeting held Monday, November 23rd. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Lynch, and anyone who thinks we don't meet enough, that's the last of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 7 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting held Monday, November 30th. Sorry, recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Robinson. I'm mistaken. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The first item of business arising out of that meeting concerns the SAFERhome Standards Society. The recommendation is that the presentation by Mr. Simpson from SAFERhome Standards Society be referred to Planning and Development staff and the Disability Issues Advisory Committee for review and a report back to Council.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The second item of business, item 7.4, concerns a conservation permit application for 1430 Pipeline Road. The recommendation is that Council decline this application for 1430 Pipeline Road.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through you to staff, I received a fax from the proponent, and we were thinking that he was going on just the back engineer's letters. Did you have a copy of the ones from 2009 as well?
To the Chair, yes, we've had numerous correspondence received from the applicant, including those 2 letters from his engineers. More just sort of overview comments about
Correct.
Previous relationships
but
as opposed to specifics.
Not in my opinion stating that they would unequivocally take responsibility for all the work that would have to be done on that property. Is that your impression?
That's correct. That remains an outstanding issue. That plus none of the specifics I think we're looking for.
Yeah, I know, but I wanted to make sure that that was in the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Any other comments? Motion is to decline. All in favor? Opposed? The application is declined. The motion carries.
The next item concerns an extension of the approval period for fourth and final reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 3940 for an 18-unit townhouse development at 562 to 568 Rochester Avenue. The recommendation is that council extend the maximum approval period for fourth and final reading for an additional 6-month period.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Next item also concerns an extension of an approval period for fourth and final reading. This is for zoning amendment bylaw number 3987 for a mixed-use commercial residential development at 580, 584, and 590 Clarke Road. The recommendation is to extend the approval period for an additional 6-month period.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 7.7 is authorization for an issuance of a development permit for a 4-story residential building in the Windsor Glen development at 1153 Kensal Place. The recommendation is that council approve the signing and sealing of this development permit and the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. The recommendation does not reflect what I thought the conversation was. And the conversation was with respect to the parking, excuse me, the loading zone. I don't see it reflected anywhere in here, so I don't think that I want to give this carte blanche to go right ahead unless we get that resolved. And I thought that's what we were going to be doing.
Your Worship,
Mr. McIntyre.
thank you. Staff took instruction to go back and work with the applicant, and there's a couple of options now that we're looking at for providing for a loading bay, either right in front of this building on the property or next door in that location, I think that we discussed last Monday at the Standing Committee. So
I'm hoping it's next door. So if I could amend this to somehow just include that the loading bay must be on site.
Your Worship, certainly if Council was to give that direction, we would ensure that that's worded into the development permit to... I'll second that. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Are we satisfied that the wording of the amendment, that the loading bay be on site, is sufficiently succinct for staff's use?
Thank you, Worship. Again, we're looking at two options right now. Certainly, we recognize there's the interest and need for this. It's just where's the optimal location to provide for it. And there's a couple of ideas, and either in front of the building or I think preferably alongside that area that we discussed at the Standing Committee.
Well, Your Worship, I think we have to be very forward-thinking on this, and the optimal place is between the two properties. As they're owned by the same landowner, it would provide us not having to have another one for the next development coming along. So I think we have to start being a little forward-thinking. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. There's a motion to amend. It's been seconded. Councillor, actually the motion to amend was on a different queue, but and now I've lost all my speakers.
The first speaker was Councillor Reid, and then the second speaker is Councillor Sikora.
Okay, Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. I wasn't too pleased with what's happening, that we're doing the lowering the amount of parking spaces that's per apartment in this development or any development. The fact is that, we're starting talking about SkyTrain 2014. This building we built and the people already be occupying it. But however, I don't want to say, well, I hope the SkyTrain gets here. It may get here, it may not. But anyways, in any case, what we're doing is starting to cut down parking spaces. So we're forcing people to either get rid of their cars, which might be a good thing, but at the same time, there's people that have to have a car and they get around to it. So, we're going to find ourselves where the people are going to be parking out on the street as they are in other areas of Coquitlam, creating a problem of cars being able to pass each other. Even on the Leicester Street that I thought we cut down on their parking, we did not, but we have a problem there. There's more cars than I guess there's spaces, even with 1.76 or whatever it is per unit. So here we are, we're cutting down by 21 parking spaces, and I don't think we should be doing it. I think it's very, very important that, hey, you know, you have to build the parking spaces, you build the parking spaces. I think very, very important. So I cannot support it on those bases. The developer is a very good developer and everything else. I admire the things that they built and everything else, and certainly have got nothing against the developer as far as being able to provide good residential property for people. Matter of fact, I live in one of their developments myself right now. But however, we're not short of parking spaces because it's got the complete parking standard that was required. So it's nice for us to say, well, we want to get rid of the cars and all that. It's fine. Want to get rid of the cars, but there's times when you can't get rid of the cars for many, many reasons. I cannot support it for that reason.
Thank you, Councillor Sikora. This is on the amendment. So if you have something to say on the amendment, I'm looking for councillors who want to address. Councillor Reid moved an amendment. Councillor McDonnell seconded it. I believe Councillor Reid's comments now are on Councillor Sikora's comments related to the motion, the base motion. So on the amendment. Any other speakers? All in favour of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment carries. The motion as amended. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Wow. So cars are a problem. Well, we've known that for a long time, and I applaud the city for taking the position of building more density, and I applaud this developer for their innovation. And I think this is an opportunity for us to really just move forward, and we have to. This isn't about, you know, we can't maintain status quo. I just think it's impossible. The other thing is that people pay for parking. It's not free. It doesn't come with your unit. You pay for it. So I'm expecting, and I haven't spoken with the developer, but I'm expecting that with less parking, there will be more affordable, which means that my children at some point might be able to afford to live in the neighborhood that they grew up in. The other thing I really like about this proposal is the car share idea. And I think we need to think outside the box. And SkyTrain is not quite here yet, but we've been promised time and time again. And I believe this time it's coming. And we need to be forward-thinking. So I am fully prepared to support this proposal. I think we need to start with one or two and see how it goes. And so I'd be very interested to see how things play out and make things more affordable for families, because there are lots of people in our community who are managing with one car and managing with no cars. They're using alternate forms of transportation, whether it's bicycle or the transit system. People are making it work. So I think we need to make those people not have to pay for a spot that they don't need. So I hope we'll get other support around this table. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. On the issue of parking, we had quite a debate at committee about it. In Coquitlam, we're sort of in a transition here from going from the old-style apartments where you'd have one or two spaces into the newer way of housing folks by having a lot less parking. And one of the ways they do it in Vancouver, and as a realtor I can tell you this is what they do, is they have similar suites in the same building, but some do not come with the ability to access a parking spot, because usually the strata takes ownership of all the parking. But they will sell some units that have no ability to have a parking spot within the building. And those units are considerably less money than the ones that do have a parking spot and parking amenities. So I think as direction for our staff that's, if people are going to start requiring less parking, then I think within the developer's disclosure statements that they should be acknowledging that there will be 10, 12, 5, whatever the number is, suites that will not have parking attached to them, and those can be sold at a lower price, and the ones that do have parking with them, of course, will be sold at a higher price. And I think we're going to find that's the way we're going to have to go, to find some a good way of transitioning our parking problems that we already have in the city. And it's going to be a way of providing a bit more affordable housing, and it's going to be a way of not having these huge parking variances. And I really hope that staff will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Sikora for the second time.
Just want to clarify the fact that there was a mention by a council member that we pay for parking. No, I'm sorry. The suites come with a certain amount of parking spaces, and that's exactly what's being proposed. And if a suite is sold, you either have a two-bedroom suite and you get 2 parking spaces, you might get one with 1-bedroom suite, but it's not something that you buy. Parking the suite comes with a parking spot to it. It's not extra, okay? So those are things I want to clarify. And if you're not providing the parking for some of the suites, then we've got a great problem. And same thing with the visitors. You know, the visitors have something like 12 or 15 parking spaces. I think that that's low, but however, that's fine. But certainly the residential is not up to the standard that we should be following. And I know that maybe we want to try and become a downtown Vancouver. We're far from being downtown Vancouver.
Okay, Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I'm going to share some of Councillor Sikora's concerns. I think we have to tread very carefully when we're talking about reducing parking or people that can buy units without parking, because then those people are going to use parking somewhere else on the streets for free and clog up the streets. We see that in a lot of areas. We saw where City University at Burnaby had a minimal number of parking spaces, and they wound up, through the university, acquiring a parking lot from the university to help with the parking in their areas. So I think we have to be very careful when we talk about reducing the number of parking and the effect it has on the rest of the community around those people. And I'm not a big proponent of saying that everybody's going to be walking, cycling, or whatever. I'd like to see that. But I think the reality, a lot of families have 2 cars. A lot of people can't live in the same area. Some may have 3 cars, some may have none cars. But I do think we have to tread very carefully in how we go about reducing parking, because if you reduce it and you don't have enough, then what? So this is a very careful area that we have to be very careful as through the staff. We have to watch that number of parking requirements and needs. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I don't have too much of an issue with this. Councillor Asmussen raised some good points. However, we haven't tried this yet in our city, and I think it's a good time to give it a try anyways. And it is a free marketplace. If it's not going to work, then people aren't going to buy them.
Yep. Actually, I'm going to agree almost exactly with that, and particularly in this particular instance. This is not an isolated building being built surrounded by other buildings owned by other. This is a developer that's building this building in the middle of a project that is, if it has any parking issues, it's going to spill over into the rest of his project in phase 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And the next buyers are going to see a neighborhood that's completely overwhelmed with parking issues. Parking is expensive. It may not be that an individual buyer has to select a parking space and cut a check for the parking space, but they cost about $40,000 each to produce, and in structured parking, and that's what's proposed here. $40,000 that gets added on to the price of the unit, because the developer doesn't simply donate the parking space to the buyer, it's added into the cost. If it's 2 spaces, that's $80,000 added into the cost. And so we have to, as we stand and promote housing affordability, we have to be really careful. We're not putting in barriers to that same affordability. At the same time, it's a balancing act to making sure we have enough parking so that we don't create challenges. I'm more comfortable with this particular proponent. It's a Polygon project. I think they'll do well, and I'll, at the risk of angering Polygon, I'll tell the prospective buyers, don't buy here if you have 4 cars. Don't buy here if you have 2 cars. If you need more parking, buy a unit that has more parking. This is a building that they're proposing for people who may have less parking needs and are going to be using public transit. Seeing no other speakers, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 7.8 concerns the preliminary report on an application related to Development Procedures Bylaw number 4068 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4069. The recommendation is the Council give first reading to Bylaw 4068, the Council give first reading to Bylaw 4069, and that Bylaw 4069 and its related application be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. In the Land Use Committee, we had the question of if Council chooses to waive public hearing, was there the threshold could be changed, and I'm just wanting to, do we have an answer for that?
Your Worship,
Mr. Mackey.
Staff have had preliminary discussions between planning and clerks. We think there's a way. We just haven't worked that out yet. Okay. So unless Jay has something more current than that, I think it can be provided for.
Yeah, I can confirm Mr. McIntyre's comments. There's been discussion and the question has gone out, and we're just doing a little bit of research. And when it comes back for second, third, and fourth reading, that information will be made available to everyone.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
And it was noted as staff direction in the minutes itself.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. No other questions related to this? Motion's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Item 8 is the minutes of the Engineering, Utilities, and Environment Standing Committee meeting of Monday, November 30th. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
First item of business is the Coquitlam River Watershed Strategy Grant application for Year 4 funding. Recommendations that Council receive this report, and secondly, that it directs staff to jointly apply with the Coquitlam First Nation and the City of Port Coquitlam for grant funding from the Fraser Salmon and Watersheds program to further support this strategy.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 8.5 concerns the elementary school walkability study. It's a phase 1 update. The recommendations that Council directs staff to report back by mid-2010 on a summary and prioritization of the school walkability capital program for the next 5-year capital plan.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor McDonough.
Thank you. I'd like to thank staff. This is great. It's long overdue. There's some very dangerous approaches to some of our schools. I wasn't able to be at the meeting for this, unfortunately, so I didn't get a chance to ask this question about the criteria for choosing some of these schools in phase 1. Would that go to Mr. Suzak? And the reason I ask that is because I've long felt that Cape Horn School, for example, down there on that busy road, and seeing the way the cars come up there with the kids on the street, I wonder why that wasn't included in phase 1.
Mr. Suzak.
Your Worship, I would have to go back to staff and get those details. What I do know is that over 30 schools are involved, and I just don't have the information off the top of my head about why exactly certain ones were in phase 1 and others were in phase 2. Nevertheless, the entire body of work is expected to be complete soon. All of the field work is done, and it's simply a case of now consolidating it all together and getting a prioritized list for you. We can get back to you on a direct staff level and get that information out to you if you would like.
I appreciate that, Mr. Suzak. I think this is a great initiative.
Thank you. I want to applaud it as well. There's no question that these issues have been raised for many, many years. Those of us who lived in Coquitlam a long time have seen them with our own children's schools. But I also knew that once the work was done, that the next phase of it would be urging for a change in the order, or perhaps reviewing the order, because there's no question that these are going to be, there's a challenging amount of work. And I'd like to see it happen as quickly as possible for all the schools. I know that one of the council members, Councillor Reamer, raised the question of middle schools, for example. That's clearly that ought to be an important part of this, because middle school kids are actually more likely to walk to school, as Councillor Reamer points out. So I think that I applaud the work that's been done. There's the next phase, of course, is answering the questions as to how the order got chosen. Good luck, Mr. Suzak. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I too applaud the work, and I'm quite pleased to see that it was actually students were invited to participate and help identify. It's always important to go back to the user group. I'm glad to hear that somebody else had asked. I also couldn't be a part of that meeting last week, so I'm glad to see that somebody else asked about middle schools, because I too think that you'll see kids that age walking more, and certainly walking alone. And I'm assuming that cycling is also part of it. When they look at pedestrian, it's also part of when I was a kid, you rode your bike to school too, so it'd be nice to see kids getting back on their bikes. But I have a question about Ranch Park, and it's the sidewalk program to add Armada west between Spurway and Daybreak. They just bought new gutters. So is it really on the plan to put in a sidewalk on Armada?
Mr. Suzak.
Your Worship, again, I would have to check that detail. There are two avenues for getting sidewalks in the city. One is through the city's own capital plan. The other is, potential citizen petition for local area service. I'm personally not aware that we have a petition for sidewalks. It could be that it is in the city's capital plan. It's a detail that I'll have to get back to you on.
So it's right on in this study on the Ranch Park page. It just says sidewalk program, add Armada west between Spurway and Daybreak. So I'm querying if the recommendation is to put a sidewalk there.
Sorry, could I have a page reference?
Suzak,
they don't have page numbers. So it's deep in the report. It's two from the end, second from the end. It's Ranch Park. At the very bottom, item 3, it says sidewalk program. I'm assuming that means put a sidewalk in.
As you go school by school, they're alphabetical, and Ranch Park is the fourth from last one on the second from last page.
I would take that to mean that a sidewalk is anticipated there.
So these residents just laid out a whole whack of money to put in new gutters, like this summer, like 8 weeks ago is when they just finished the work. They just finished laying the sod, I think, last week.
Now, I guess the question might be, are these works complementary? Can you then, because the curb stays where it is and then you add a sidewalk next to it, are these works complementary? Mr. Suzak.
I didn't have to buy all of it.
Off the top of my head, Your Worship, without knowing the details, I'm presuming that the curb and gutter project would likely be local area service, a citizen petition. That's probably what it is, and this was presumably identified in its own program as part of a school a safety program. Probably two different and independent views of what to do on that street.
So, but the reality is, these residents are each paid, I don't know, $1,000 or whatever they've paid. And now we're going to tear it up and put in a sidewalk.
Well, Your Worship, I wouldn't expect that we would be tearing anything up. I'll have to look into that. I would not expect we
they didn't need to, or they didn't need to buy these gutters, at least on one side, because they were going to be getting a sidewalk. Because
just that the curb and gutter is a separate construction from the sidewalk, and the two can be built separately.
That's correct, Your Worship. The sidewalk can be constructed completely independently of curb and gutter. I will check this and get back to members of council. My presumption is that the sidewalk would simply be constructed up to the back of the curb and gutter that was requested and constructed for the residents.
So it would be back from the property, from the curb and gutter. It would go back onto the property.
It would be on the back side of the curb and gutter.
That's fine. That's helpful. Thank you very much. I was just waiting for your phone.
Okay, Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to see this, and although I acknowledge there are probably more middle school students who walk to school in elementary, I think one of the purposes of this, of course, is to encourage children and their parents, if need be, to walk to school. So I think it's a fabulous thing. I too had a question about Ranch Park Elementary School. There is a park just to the north of the school, and I know that there are some students who walk down a trail in that park to get to and from school and then out to Mariner Way. So I'm just wondering if that was considered in some of the remedies that need to be done here.
Yes, is the question, is it limited to traffic safety, or is there also other elements of safety of a person?
That's right.
I will have to get back to staff on that detail, Your Worship. I don't have that detail off the top of my head.
Thank you, and I I anticipate, though, that this is a program that's limited at this point to traffic safety issues, not to safety within the park or something like that.
Principally traffic, principally the issue of safety in and around roadways.
Okay. Alrighty, thank you. Because I did receive a call from, I believe it was a PAC chairperson at Ranch Park concerning that very issue.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers to this, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. The work begins.
Item 9 is the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting held Monday, November 30th. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Sikora.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting a lot of calls lately since we started building the Spirit Square from Glen Pine. The people that belong to Glen Pine, there's about 1,500 of them in there, and we have about 24 parking spaces for them. And the complaint is, the fact is that they don't want to go there anymore because we've taken their parking away because they used to park where Glen Pine, where the Spirit Square is being built.
Councillor Sikora, hate to interrupt. That's the next item. We're just going to finish with the minutes. Are there any other discussion of the minutes?
Well, I don't know where the next item would come in for something like this.
We're just on the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Cultural Standing Committee. And the next item is Spirit Square.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the minutes? Opposed? Carried. Mr. Clerk.
First item of business arising out of those minutes concerns Spirit Square. It's the Community Builders Recognition Policy. The recommendation is that Council approve this policy.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Sikora, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm getting calls from the people that live go to Glen Pine, and because we built the Spirit Square, we took a lot of parking away, and there's only 24 parking or 26 parking places for all of Glen Pine with 1,500 members. They said, what's the sense of even belonging? And because the staff are steering them to park in Coquitlam Center and other places, well, a lot of them have walking problems and cannot park that far away. So I'm just wondering if we can look at the possibility of getting some parking spaces around there that we can possibly look at for developing forms, so we can not lose all those members from Glen Pine, because we're going to lose a tremendous amount of those members.
Okay, this is about the recognition policy, but specific to the parking at Glen Pine. Ms. McKay.
Staff received that information with thanks from Council. We'll follow up with the members and the board at Glen Pine to explore parking alternatives. We recognize that the temporary use of that lot for parking was a great convenience for many people, but it's not available anymore, so we'll look to identify what the available parking is to support the members at Glen Pine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now on Spirit Square Community Builders Recognition, Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. At our committee meeting, we voted on removing the builders part out of the recognition policy. So I see it's reflected here.
Yeah, it's reflecting the recommendation on the screen, and the attached policy has been changed as well. You'll see a note that it was revised as per direction from the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee in the attachment 1 to the policy, and it's now called the Spirit Square Community Recognition Policy as per direction from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert.
So the motion on the floor is that Council approve the Spirit Square Community Recognition Policy without the word builders.
That is correct. The original report had builders in it.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, I think this is a great idea. I think taking these boulders, putting pillars of the community's name and recognizing them in such a open and public area is going to create a legacy of history to our community and create that attachment for future generations. So I think and glad staff that came up with this idea. I'm very supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much. I too am very supportive of this. I think it's wonderful that we're going to honor individuals or organizations that have made significant contributions to their community. And I'd just like to thank staff very much. I think the Spirit Square Community Recognition Policy is a fabulous name for it.
enthusiasm, too. No other speakers? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We all think it's fabulous.
The next item arising out of the minutes of the committee is other business item 2 concerning fees and charges. The recommendations that Council approve the following implementation strategy for leisure parks fees and charges policy recently approved by Council. 1, apply a phased approach to increasing adult, private, and commercial fees to the average, whereby no increase would be greater than 10 to 15% in 2010. And 2, retain the current youth rates, admission and rentals for 2010.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Robinson. No discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The next item is in fact item 10, and it concerns bylaw for fourth and final reading and final adoption. The subject is the City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4053, and the recommendation is that Council give consideration to fourth and final reading of Bylaw 4053.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 11 is a verbal report of the Mayor concerning the 2010 to 2014 financial plan.
And this is budget night. This is the night when Council will be adopting a financial plan for not only next year but for subsequent years as well. About a year ago, a new council was sworn in for the City of Coquitlam, and I personally was humbled and honored, very appreciative of the support I received in being elected mayor of the community I grew up in. Citizens of Coquitlam put their trust in the members of council before you, and I know that all of council has worked hard in the first year of its mandate to maintain your confidence in our representation. This evening I'm going to speak about some of the highlights and accomplishments of 2009 and about our 2010 to 2014 financial plan. 2009 has proven to be a challenging year for households, for businesses and governments in BC and indeed across the country. Throughout much of the year, we faced a depressed economy, which has had an impact on many sectors of our society. And as I said last year at this time, the City of Coquitlam certainly isn't immune from these challenges. Over the past year, we've faced several challenges, the largest of which is severely reduced revenue resulting from the economic times in which the world finds itself. Our 2009 revenue was down about $5 million, largely due to lower than expected development and the fees that go with that, but also to lower interest rates and therefore less interest income on our reserves. As a result of these challenges, we've had to hold back on some capital projects that were planned for this year, and on the operational side, the City of Coquitlam has had to maneuver through the year very carefully. City departments, for example, have reduced their discretionary spending and have held vacant positions open where possible. Due to steps taken early in the year and to the fact that Coquitlam entered into the economic slowdown in a relatively strong financial position, we've been very successful at being able to maintain services and even continue to flourish in these conditions. Labor savings, reductions of other expenditures, reduced capital spending, and contributions to reserve funds have all helped the City to manage this shortfall. And even though it's been a very challenging year, the City's been able to complete a number of its top priorities, of City Council's top priorities in 2009. Our City's done well compared to some other communities because we've been proactive in responding early to what appeared to be rough waters on the horizon. As mentioned, we have been able to make good progress on this year's business plan initiatives and have moved the City forward in some very significant ways. For example, we've commenced BizPal, which is an online business permits and licenses services in partnership with the Government of Canada and BC. We opened the Town Centre Sports Fields, which is a world-class outdoor recreation facility. We signed a Friendship City agreement with the City of Paju, Korea, and hosted an official delegation from that city. Introduced a new e-com computer-aided dispatch service system for fire and rescue, which will enhance public safety. Completed the Centennial Room renovation at Poirier Community Centre, adopted the Southwest Coquitlam Area Plan. We held a successful Business Roundtable Economic Development Forum, followed by Council's endorsement of an Economic Development Action Plan. We initiated a number of improvements to our development applications process. We put in place a low-cost summer outdoor pools program, which attracted 10,000 more participants than the year before. We launched WinterWise on the other end of the climate spectrum, a comprehensive public awareness and education program around extreme weather. We adopted a new snow and ice policy and program, which we hope will never be used. Completed the preliminary design work for the Evergreen Rapid Transit project. Coquitlam's QNet fiber optic network had its first successful year under its belt. This is one of the first city-owned optical fiber leasing companies in North America, providing residents and businesses with the most competitive telecommunications choices and some really enormous bandwidth within our city. We implemented a corporate energy management plan through which we monitor corporate greenhouse gas emissions in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2012 and an overall 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2015. We introduced our new web streaming service, which some people will be watching on tonight. It's an exciting new initiative designed to provide the public additional options and greater access to council meetings, to public hearings, and to standing committee meetings. You can now watch city proceedings live or from archived files right from your computer. We received federal and provincial monies in the amount of $9.7, almost $10 million for King Edward North and Schoolhouse Road improvement projects, $800,000 for Southwest Coquitlam sewer force main, a $700,000 for upgrades to the town center sports field complex, and most recently $6 million for paving of the Lougheed and Barnett highways. That's more than $17 million of senior government funding, which will be leveraged into more than $36 million of necessary and timely work in our community in 2009 and 2010. Those partnerships with senior levels of government are incredibly important and will continue to support the kinds of work we have to do with other levels of government. That serves as a backdrop to the financial report on this evening's council agenda. Before pointing out a few highlights of the financial plan, I want to say that Council is very pleased with our staff's work in preparing this document. They worked diligently to reflect in this plan the directions of Council. In fact, this is one of the most comprehensive financial plan processes that the city has been through in years. Last year, I made a commitment that we would start our budget process earlier and run a more extensive process. And I'm especially pleased that together, Council and staff began a year ago to address what looked like would be a financially challenging year, not just here in Coquitlam, but indeed around the world. For example, our staff has been conducting a rotating operational and budget analysis, department by department. Through this process, which we've called cyclical reviews, we've been carefully analyzing the work of all our departments, looking for and then implementing new ways of doing business in a more efficient manner. We've recently completed reviews of our communications, land management, environmental services, and engineering areas. This practice will continue into 2010. The actions taken throughout the year have helped to ease the burden of what has been a year of declining revenues for business and government. This evening, Council will be giving first 3 readings to its 2010 financial plan. An extensive process for the elected officials, staff, and the community took place in preparation of this plan, and I want to thank everyone who contributed to this work. As a result, we have put together a budget for 2010 which reduces some historical expenditures and provides some new funding with a net result of a tax increase which is less than the city's inflationary costs for the next year. Unfortunately, with lower revenues and with pressures from inflation, particularly related to the long-term labor agreements we're operating under, a tax increase is inevitable. But Council and staff have worked diligently to minimize that tax increase and to protect as many of the services as we possibly can, because we know in talking with the residents of Coquitlam that services that we provide are incredibly valued. Services from our fire department, our police department, but also from water, sewer, parks, roadways, the kinds of services that people use every day. So we're incorporating the following tax increases for the upcoming year based upon the average value of a home in Coquitlam. It would cost $76 on an average residential property, or 4.96%. $31 is the water rate increase, or 9.5%. $11 for the drainage rate, or 3.0%. And $64 for solid waste services increase, or 27%. I want to point out that the last 3 of these items are a combination of utility charges by Metro Vancouver, and for the last item, it's also the contracted services that looks after our solid waste program. This is the second year of having to react to a significant increase in costs associated with solid waste. The Greater Vancouver Sewer and Drainage Levy saw a 2.5% increase over the 2009 level, while the Greater Vancouver Water District Levy is expected to increase by 12.3% in this coming year, again, well over inflation. Budgeted increases for solid waste will increase by 27% next year. These increases alone account for almost 60% of the overall rate increase for 2010. You'll see in this financial plan that Council has taken an aggressive stance to balance our budget by carefully examining a long list of projects and services and making decisions whether to proceed with them. In some cases, Council has had to make the difficult decision to cut some items, but we've done so only after carefully considering various alternatives and the impacts that could occur. But Council was resolved to keep a tax increase to the absolute minimum level while supporting the services that our community values, especially in public safety. Our city's greatest investment is our infrastructure. The value of Coquitlam's pipes, parks, roads, and recreation facilities add up to a staggering $1.1 billion. Maintaining this investment is probably the single most important issue facing local governments right across Canada. As items like water mains reach the end of their life cycle, it's important that they get replaced. Roadways and bridges in general are in constant need of upgrading and repair. And on top of what we have to maintain, there's the need to provide new services for a growing community. With growth, of course, comes demand for more services and to keep up with the growth, more roads, more recreation services, expanded public transit, new water mains, and so on. This Council has carefully managed our city's assets while being vigilant with the new investments we're making. The new King Edward Overpass, which will begin significant construction next month, is an example of a project designed to meet the needs of a growing community. That section of Lougheed Highway has become increasingly busy with traffic, and as a result, traffic bottlenecks and traffic safety concerns are also increased. Residents of Coquitlam have come to expect excellent standards with respect to what we have in our city, and therefore, for the most part, enjoy a high standard of living. We'll hear about the cost of living and about inflation and interest charges. These have impact on our municipality as they do for any family household. If the cost of construction is on the rise, for example, then this must be acknowledged in our work and our planning. 2010's tax rate change of 4.96% fairly reflects what the city requires to meet both its capital and operational requirements. Taxes this year, of course, go largely toward maintaining what we already have: programs, services, and infrastructure. A certain proportion of our taxes also supports what we have committed to in the past, as well as helps us to grow in priority areas important to our community. Our tax increase this year addresses inflationary pressures such as our contractual commitments to both city and RCMP staff, as well as funding for a by-election, preventive maintenance for city facilities, disability management and wellness programs, and phase 1 of a plan to establish funding for the RCMP's Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, or IHIT. Traditionally, there are programs within the city that weren't funded in our budget. They were paid for out of what was essentially surplus revenue. This year, Council has taken on head-on the task of trying to identify funding for these, which has meant the challenging choices of where do you get that money from. Coquitlam's total operating budget for 2010 will be nearly $178,500,000, $178,500,000, or 3.3% more than this year's budget. Capital program costs will rise to just over $64 million from approximately $53 million this year. We will, of course, continue to work jointly with others, such as the federal, provincial, and regional governments, in order to access funding where we can for city projects. The 2010 to 2014 capital plan includes $210 million made up of monies from various sources, including general revenue, development cost charges, grants, and reserves. Transportation is our #1 priority, and in this area, over the same period, we've allocated $82 million. Some example projects in our capital program include the King Edward widening, the Schoolhouse Road reconstruction, the Southwest Coquitlam sewer force main system, Town Centre Stadium track replacement, and Town Centre Stadium roof replacement. A few other highlights from the 2010-2014 program include City Road Rehabilitation Program, the Traffic Safety Program, King Edward Street Overpass, Sports Centre Renewal Project, Town Centre Fire Hall, and Coast Meridian Widening. This again is an ambitious program that contains in particular some of the largest capital improvement projects that our city has seen in some time. We're going to be able to complete these based on prudent budgeting, expert project management, and working with partners. For example, we'll be partnering with senior levels of government on many of these projects, which will allow us to effectively leverage our financial resources. To assist in the understanding of the city's financial plan, we'll be communicating with the public in a variety of ways, including putting financial plan information in our utility and tax notices, producing financial plan and annual report documents, displaying information boards in the lobby areas of some of our city facilities, and providing a financial section on the city's website at coquitlam.ca. Beyond that, I invite our citizens to contact City Hall to ask any questions you might have, and we'll do our best to ensure your questions are answered. There are going to be some significant milestones in our city next year, and one of the first will be the Spirit Square, which will be opening very soon, almost any day now. It was just an agenda item on this one detail of the Spirit Square. This is going to be one of our principal community gathering places where we will be able to celebrate our heritage and achievements and leave a legacy for generations to come. This is yet another example of one of the many city partnerships that brings not just financial resources, but opportunities for groups to work together, to share experiences, and help the city become the best it can be. With great anticipation, we've all been waiting as well for the opening of our new sports centre. What a great addition this is going to be to our community. It's going to be opening next month, almost a year ahead of schedule. The current numbers show that we're several $1 million under budget at this point, but we don't want to release that yet. One of the challenges with this project is, first of all, it's the largest construction project the city's ever undertaken in terms of absolute dollars, and making sure it was managed properly. This council has made absolutely certain that staff had the resources and the systems in place to make sure that we were able to manage that project, bring it in on time, well ahead of time, and well ahead of budget as well. We've also received word that the Express Junior A Hockey Club, who once called Coquitlam home, want to return to our community and make the new sports centre their new home. This is certainly welcome news for our community, and we wish the club all the best in their discussions with the league to make that happen. We're also excited for everyone else who's been waiting for the big opening. That's recreational skaters, figure skaters, curlers, and our dry floor users like lacrosse players, who are all anxious, I'm sure, to get into this fabulous new facility. The eyes of the world will be on our community on February 11th when ancient tradition meets modern-day Coquitlam. The Olympic torch not only doesn't just pass through our community, it stays a while, and it allows us to all take in its symbolic meaning. Coquitlam is one of the last stops in its 106-day, 45,000-kilometer journey before the Olympic flame lights in the cauldron in Vancouver the following day. We're looking forward to this event, and I know our citizens will be providing a warm and enthusiastic welcome on the morning of February 11th. Our future success is dependent on partnerships. You have heard me mention partnerships a lot this evening because I believe, and Council believes, that solutions to challenges come not from government alone. The City of Coquitlam works with numerous partners to achieve the many projects and initiatives that are in front of us at any given time. Whether it's constructing new roadways or bridges, creating new civic spaces, or lobbying for improved transportation services, we are working with others, often with senior levels of government. More importantly, we continue an ongoing dialogue with our citizens on a broad range of topics. All of our citizens are welcomed and indeed encouraged to attend council and committee meetings, project open houses, and to even give us a call now and then to let us know how we're doing, or to send us an email, or drop by on the web and watch a council meeting until they're tired of watching a council meeting. It's been a productive and rewarding year, and there are signs that this positive activity is going to continue into the future. In just the last quarter, for example, we're beginning to see a turnaround. There's been a significant increase in development permit activity, which indicates that we're heading in the right direction and that our economy is on a course of repair and revitalization. Together, we're making the changes required to keep Coquitlam at the forefront of neighborhood and community development, Our efforts are broadly recognized as evidenced in the awards that this municipality collects and the inquiries it receives related to how it does its work. On behalf of Council, we thank you for your support and constructive input, and we're committed to our citizens and their desire and passion to have Coquitlam become the best that it can be. Thank you all.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item is item 12. It's the report of the Manager of Financial Services, and its subject is the 2010 Financial Plan Bylaw number 4079. The two recommendations are that Council give first, second, and third readings to see Coquitlam Financial Plan Bylaw number 4079, and that staff are directed to proceed with a counter-petition process in support of long-term borrowing for the Coast Meridian Widening Project.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. I want to first get some of the facts straight here in this report. It says 4.96% as far as the change in tax rate is concerned. Has there been a change since we met, or is that the one for the business taxes that would normally 0.75 drops off for the businesses and 0.75 is added on to the residential, which is 5-point-some-odd%. Am I correct? Or what has dropped off since the last Saturday to make it 4.96? Because on the board it showed us 5-point-some-odd%. I can't hear you.
Can you hear that?
There we go.
Through the chair, that 4.96 represents the average tax increase for all property classes in Coquitlam. After the tax shift, the residential number will go up to 5.28, and the business class will go down to 4.53%. But the average remains at 4.96.
So it is 5-point-some-odd%. That's all right. Secondly, what's an average property worth in Coquitlam? I'm talking an average. 550,000?
The average residential property in Coquitlam now is approximately $500,000.
$500,000. Okay, if you take 5% of 500,000, how much is that? Be $250, roughly? Am I correct?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Well, you've got here $76, and I don't know how you get $76 with a 4.96% increase on $550,000 property. Can't be 76. It's more like $250. Okay. So that's one correction I'd like to correct. Okay. Second one, that we borrowed $12 million for short-term borrowing.
Actually, Councillor Sikora,
go ahead.
I think Ms. Easton wants to.
I apologize. I needed a moment to think there. You're taking 5% of the value of the property, not the value of the taxes. So you have to take, if you want to change it by 5%, you take 5% of the tax bill, which is considerably smaller than $500,000.
No, but if you're increasing people's taxes by 5% on their property, and it's a $550,000 piece of property.
It is 5% of the tax bill, not 5% of the property value.
Okay. Councillor Sikora, 5% of 550,000 is.
Now then you have here that 2011-2014, the taxes will go up by 3 to 5%. Now I don't know how you see. You have a problem there, or I have a problem with it there, because we had a short-term borrowing for $12 million for 5 years. We have to pay it back in 5 years. That means we have to pay it back by more than $2 million a year. And 1% is $900,000. So to me, it adds up to be about 2.5% per year, just on that alone.
Sheena.
The short-term borrowing bylaw of $12 million is related to the temporary financing of the ICE program. The city has funding in place for the ICE program. However, it's over a longer period of time. We've been able to speed up that project and we're doing it more quickly, which is why we temporarily financed it for $12 million, is not being paid back by incremental taxes. It's being paid back by the normal sources that we would use to fund that project, which is primarily casino funding that will come in over the subsequent years. So taxes will not go up because of that.
But it has to be paid within period of 5 years. So it's actually $2.some-odd million per year.
Yes, and we'll collect that through casino funds.
Okay, thank you. See, Mayor, what I'm talking about is that last year our taxes went up by 7.54%. And this year we say that we have a shortfall of $5 million in the budget. So really, if there's a $5 million shortfall in the budget, that means it's a number that we're using, but it's not realistic, that number. Otherwise, our taxes would have gone up by 13-14%. So, and also this year, like any other year, we've gone up by $9 million a year on our taxes in our budget, by $9 million a year. To me, in 6 or 7 years, our taxes are more than double. Okay? I think the only way, Mayor, that we can bring this octopus under control is by going to zero-based budgeting. You know, it's we borrowed $12 million, and actually we borrowed $12 million to prop up our budget. I call it that, and I'll tell you why I call it that. Because council members of the last few years, last year voted to put extra 2% on taxes for the sports facility, the ice arena. Then they decided that they couldn't do it. So it's propping up a budget as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that, you know, and we're not repaying some of our building replacement fund to keep the taxes down. You know, that is going to hit us one of these days. And we also get about $10 to $12 million from the casino on a yearly basis. And also, then I found out again that I was correct a few years ago, that we are taxing people on our casino money. We're taxing people on our casino money, whether it be on $2 million or $3 million that's being used. We tax people on our casino money plus interest. So our solid waste is going up again by 27.5%. Our water at 9 point some odd percent. So really, I find that it's pretty hard to deal with this budget or support this kind of budget, because I don't see any sunset in this thing. I see it coming up on a yearly basis over and over again. Our capital projects that you mentioned, Mayor, today, about that we went some of the capital projects to keep the budget down. I asked twice in these council chambers to give me what capital project we held up. I couldn't get an answer. So that means that there wasn't any. They've been held up. So to me, I think that, you know, this council is not willing to deal with the real issue as far as budget is concerned and as far as taxes increases are concerned. And next year is going to be worse, or the year after is going to be worse. Mind you, I shouldn't say that because, of course, next year is election year, isn't it? Or the budget will be just before election year, so it might be a little bit of a change. You know, we might get a little nervous feet and that type of deal. But however, Mayor, you know, I'll tell you, I know that we fought with the problem of recession and everything else, but you know something? In my 37 years, I've gone through recessions in this city. This is not new. We had one in the 80s, we had one in the 90s, we had one in the 70s. Every 10 years, you have a recession. But we weren't going with these crazy tax increases. And so that's all I'm going to say. I could go on and on, Mayor, but I don't think it's worth it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to clarify a couple of points. How much is the annual tax on the average, that average house, the $500,000 residential property in Coquitlam pays an average tax rate of what?
The tax portion is $1,508.
Oh, 1,508, and the 5% increase, of course, is on the 1,508, not on the 500,000.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. And last year's tax increase average was 7.1. That's right. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lynch.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the first 3 readings of the budget this year. It's not because I like everything that's in the budget, and there's a few things that I would like to have seen in it that aren't included. But what we did do is we requested our staff to look through their budgets and come back with some recommendations of where we could be saving money and cutting costs. And quite frankly, we didn't accept all of those. Sometimes the recommendations from staff were something that we just didn't think were palatable because they either cut services or staff or something that we thought that was very important to the city. And those are some decisions we made. Last year, when I was opposed to the budget, I was opposed partly because just prior to the budget coming out, there was a major last-minute adjustment that I didn't agree with. And again, that process was changed this year where we knew fully and completely in advance what we were dealing with. We had lots of time to discuss it, to go through it, and to discuss where we wanted to cut things. There's some things in this budget that we simply didn't have any choice. For instance, the $150,000 for a by-election. That's unfortunate, but that's the price that we pay for democracy, and then we're going to have to fulfill the requirements to have another councillor on this council. I think that overall, this has been a difficult time. Every budget's a difficult time. I certainly don't like to see it at 4.96%, but the alternative was, as I mentioned before, to cut either services or staff in areas that were quite important. And I don't think that that would have been in the best interests of the city. The one thing that I do have some concerns about, though, is the amount of cost that we have for our garbage removal. I don't think that we really knew full well when we went out for a proposal to do those costs, what it's going to cost us. And I do recall asking for some comparisons with, I believe it was the City of Port Moody, some other municipalities, just how much are we saving when we chose to go with a route where we contracted out, especially when we didn't have a lot of choices when the prices were coming back in. They were significantly more than we were expecting when we initially were going out to tender. So that really can't help us much on this budget, but is some facts I would like for future deliberations so we can determine whether or not we are doing the best deal for our residents as far as garbage removal. And of course, Metro Vancouver, as you already mentioned, Mayor, Metro Vancouver has incurred some costs that they simply are going to pass on to us. And we, having to have a budget that's balanced, simply have no choice other than to either make significant cuts or pass on the increases. And that's what this council has chose to do. And as unpalatable as it is, it's something that I'm choosing to support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robinson. Thank
you. I echo Councillor Lynch's sentiments as well. I too didn't support last year's budget, mostly because the process didn't quite feel comfortable to me. Some of it was about perhaps first-time budgeting, but now that this is my second budget, I have to say that the process was greatly enhanced in terms of putting in the time, but also having an opportunity, having staff provide us with where there might be some, what they call fat, so that we could actually see where we could trim and what was palatable and what was unpalatable. So it really certainly gave me a better sense of where we could make some changes. The increase is a tough one, but then it comes down to things like having our snow removal. We certainly already have had residents really expressing concern about snow on sidewalks and if they can't remove the snow, and should the city be responsible. Well, everything comes with a price, and it isn't clear to me from the residents what it is they want us to cut. I hear consistently, taxes are too high, and it's like, okay, so what should we do without? What is it that we shouldn't have? Is it the seniors program? Maybe we should shut down some pools. Maybe we shouldn't improve walkability in our communities. That's the part that I find most frustrating, is sitting and making those decisions, knowing that it's going to be affecting people. Is not one that I don't think anyone here takes that responsibility lightly. So I will support it, and it's a tough pill to swallow, but I don't know that we had any other option. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. Councillor Asmussen?
I too am going to be supporting this budget. I think council as a group worked very hard. We worked very hard at coming together, I think, in a stronger consensus on council than last time that we had and looking at the budget. And we've dealt with just not this budget period, but throughout the year of about a $5 million reduction, as Mayor Stewart pointed out earlier, and having to adjust to that by letting go some temporary full-time people, keeping vacancies open, and doing a lot of work by staff, picking up slack and everything to maintain services. We've heard in different surveys and information from the public at large that they want us to maintain services, and council was aware of that information going forward. And we have done that in our due diligence. We have taken a time off year where for the last 5 years we've been adding 6 police officers to our force over a 10-year plan, but we're going to take a timeout year. That takes about a 1% tax increase. We're not going to do that this year. One of the things I've always supported and wants a safe city. We were greatly under-resourced in our RCMP, and we still need to move forward in properly staffing our RCMP. But realizing the world we're in today, this council decided to take a timeout year on that issue of policing. Secondly, we have had some increased cost. Without having that RCMP that we're hiring, we don't have the same funds to pay for IHIT, Integrated Homicide Task Team. There's around $900,000 a year, and every year I've been on council, I've asked for this council to start a plan to start putting money aside in the budget to properly fund it. We've done that this year because we won't have the savings within the RCMP that we had in the past years. When we hire those officers, we don't get them for 4 to 5 months. And that savings in our budget we use to pay for IHIT. But it's something that this council's agreed that we have to keep moving on to properly budget and finance the cost of our IHIT team. Everyone on this council, and myself included, is taking very seriously this look at our budget and the difficulty in making choices that we had to make to keep the tax rate as low as possible without affecting service. And I'm proud of all the councillors and the work that we put in, and we put a lot of time involved in this. We are moving in a direction that I think is important as a city going forward, providing the services for the citizens. Will we have difficult choice in the future? Yes. We've started a process of cyclical reviews. We did 3 departments last year, looking at just not cutting things, but looking at how our organization and departments are structured. We're going to be doing a report, as Mr. Southern said, with an engineering and utilities coming up soon, and then we're going to do another 3 departments again. And we're going to go out through the whole city over time, looking at how we can find efficiencies in our operations to make this city as efficiently and responsible to the taxpayer as possible. And for those reasons, I will be supporting this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you.
Oops, second. Get your microphone on.
Is it on?
There it is. It was on until you turned it off. There it is. Okay, you're on.
You keep turning me on and turning me off somehow.
I didn't touch any of your buttons.
Thank you. I will be supporting the budget. This was a very different, thank you. I've got a froggy in my throat. This is a very different process that we went through this year. I have to thank Mr. Steblin for that and Mr. Dumont. It was a longer process, much more detail-oriented than it ever has been. And although sometimes you like to think of it as for the newer members of council who had asked a lot of questions last year, it was most enlightening to me, and for that I thank you. And I thank Sheena McLeod. Without you, I don't know where this city would be. You have done an incredible job. When Ms. McLeod would come forward to us and say, well, this is where I think we are, we'd say, oh, we can't do that. And back she'd go, and the next week with a new number, and back she'd go. The department heads jumped in, and they said, well, you know, we've been challenged to cut, snip, 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 and that they did. And back they came again. And I have to compliment them all very much on providing the service with a bare minimum of staff. And for that, I will be supporting the budget. And one comment I want to make. you can take numbers and you can do a lot of things with them, and numbers are all in the way that the person who wants to interpret them looks at them, and you interpret them from the place that you want to interpret them from. But there is no way that I believe that we could have come up with a better and more efficient budget than we have this year. And for that, I want to thank staff and my fellow council members. This has been a very good process this year, and I'm very proud of where we've come from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to want to make two comments. It's been alluded to, we're going to have a by-election, and that's one of those things where suddenly a cost comes up where it's closer to $250,000 to run a by-election, and we're going to have to bear that. The city will have to bear it. We're working on a way to see if we can spread those kinds of costs out over multiple years, on years when we don't have an election in it, but it costs almost the same to run a by-election as it costs to run a general election. And similarly, it was mentioned earlier about interest rates. We have a lot of reserves that come in primarily for development related uses. We get money in and we spend it on development servicing, big pipes, big roads, and such. And about $100 million that we keep in reserve for those projects, we can't spend it on other stuff, but we can keep the interest, and the interest helps fund the operations of the city. Unfortunately, when the interest rates were 5%, it allowed us a lot more than when the interest rates are 1% for that kind of revenue, for those kinds of reserves. So that loss of revenue, once again, we're facing it now, and we're unsure as to how that's going to play out in this coming year, as to whether interest rates will rise again and we'll start to get a better return on those reserves. But I applaud council because it's one thing to say we're going to start the process earlier and we're going to do a lot more work, and we did. And it meant a lot more work, it meant a lot more meetings, and staff and council and the public all participated, and staff particularly got the work done. Council had to come to those meetings and had to be engaged in this process much earlier. So I applaud everyone on council for the work that's been done here. This isn't exactly how I would have done it either. I lost some votes in this budget process, as happens every year. But it's all about a compromise, trying to find that best position that will serve the needs of all of the residents of Coquitlam. Councillor Reamer has one more comment. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much. I fully support this. This was one of the city's most extensive budget processes that we've ever gone through. And as a new councillor, I really appreciated that this year, because although it was very extensive, it was also, for the newer councillors, I think, an easier process. So I thank staff very much. Our budget process was wonderfully organized and easy to understand. And the economic recession that we've been going through this past year, and will probably continue to go through for the coming year, it really causes organizations and individuals to identify what their true priorities are. And I think that was certainly true for we councillors and the mayor sitting around the table. And so I'm really happy with it. I'm happy that we were to keep the tax rate fairly low, and that we didn't have to cut an awful lot of services. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other speakers.
Do you think we can afford heat next year?
No, we've cut back on the heat to the satisfaction of at least half of council. It is a little bit cooler in council chambers tonight. The motion before us is the financial plan and the counter-petition process. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
The next item is the DCC appropriation bylaws in support of the 2010 financial plan. The recommendations that Council give first three readings to the following development cost charge reserve fund expenditure bylaws. One related to transportation, bylaw 4082. One related to parkland improvement, related bylaw number 4083. One related to parkland interest, and that's 4084. Drainage, which is bylaw 4085. Sanitary, which is bylaw 4086. Water, which is bylaw 4087.
So moved. Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reid. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. That will make it much more efficient this year.
Item 14 concerns the 2010 water, sewerage, drainage, and solid waste rate amendments. The recommendation is the Council give first three readings to Coquitlam Water Distribution Amendment Bylaw number 4088. That first three readings are given to City of Coquitlam Sewerage and Drainage System Amendment Bylaw 4089, and that Council give first three readings to Coquitlam Solid Waste Amendment Bylaw 4090.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this solid waste, I think Councillor Lynch mentioned it. The fact is that it seems to be enough. Although the service is excellent, I've had no complaints and everything else on it, so that's a plus. But however, that this thing had gone up by 60-some-odd% last year, and now it's going up by another 27%. So I don't know. I think that, you know, maybe we should have gone out for proposal calls a lot sooner than we did, and see what could have happened. Or I don't know. I know that I was out of town when this bylaw was brought in and voted on, but I certainly, far from being happy with the prices that the people have to pay. You take the jump on this year alone from $238 per household to $302. I mean, that's a very hefty increase. That's a very hefty, and last year was 64%. So I can imagine the screams that we're going to get from the public out there as far as their taxes are concerned. What is happening here is very simple. I know that taxes must go up and that type of deal, and services must go up and a few other things. But the fact is that there's an awful lot of people in our community that are on fixed income. And first, a fixed income. The old thing that they collect is old age pension. They don't have the pension that some of the staff and the council members have as far as pensions are concerned, or have some coming. Oh yeah, I mean, but however, that they can live on it, and in fact, is some goes up. So what is price of living in Coquitlam? But certainly there's many people that can't afford it. I mean, when you hear about 80-year-old people saying, I think I'm going to have to go out and get myself a job, that seems to be, pretty rigid and that type of thing. But the service, I must say that Smith-Wright is providing a #1 service at the cost that I don't know whether we could have done better or not. I'm not going to debate it at this particular time, but 27%, an awful jump in 1 year. Thank you.
Perhaps Sheena could explain to Councillor Sikora, this cost actually was determined about 16 months ago with the bidding process that established a new contract price, and in any case it gets split up. The increase got split up over 2 years, so this was already set a couple of years ago. Go ahead.
Okay.
Last year,
go ahead.
And there's 27% this year. That's all I'm going on. I don't need no explanation.
Well, I realize that, but perhaps we'll get the explanation in any case. Go ahead, Ms. McLeod.
During 2008, the city's previous garbage contract expired, and so the city went out to a tender process. I believe we got 6 or 8 proponents, and we looked at all of the bidders, and we picked the best value to the citizens of Coquitlam. That contract started partway through 2009 and ended up having a full contract by midway through 2010. So 2010 will be the first year. The increase was split up over a 2-year period. Last year the increase was actually 49%, and this year the increase is 27%, and it's driven by 2 factors. The second half of that contract that was publicly bid, and the other thing is an increase in the tipping fees from the Greater Vancouver Regional District of 15%. So that's what's driving that increase this year. One of the things actually to note, though, is prior to that contract being bid, during 2009, the city's garbage rate didn't go up for approximately 15 years. So it was very steady for a very long time.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Ms. McLeod, I'm wondering if you could, do we expect an increase like this again from garbage contracts, or is just it? We're at this sort of this plateau, and there may be some tipping fees or whatever, but
our expectation that as moving into the future, you'll see much more reasonable increases relative to our contract, although I know that Metro Vancouver is going through a number of things that they're looking at that may have an impact into the future years, but our contract situation should be dealt with by the end of 2010.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, clearly no member of council enjoys this. These costs are beyond our control. They were pretty much determined to come about 18 months ago or 14 months ago with the bids that came in, and thankfully Low Bid was a company that clearly knows how to collect garbage, and we've had very good response from Smith Wright. They know how to do their work, and they've done it very well. But the cost of garbage collection has gone up in the last 15 years, and we hadn't seen an increase in that time. So that's not that doesn't make me happy, but it makes me understand at least where we're at. Next year, there really isn't an increase in line for next year. So, motion before us. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed this time. Go ahead.
Next item, item 15, concerns the 2010 fees and charges bylaw. Recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to the fees and charges bylaw number 4076.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
I was going to ask, sorry, it was just the mayor, I was going to ask a question.
You weren't on. I'll reverse you here. Go ahead. Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. You know, I was going to ask a question of the Parks Recreation Director, but I see she's not here. I was going to ask a question about this HST. How is that going to affect us for next year? Or is this price increases included with HST? I believe that's what it is. Sheena, can you maybe answer that?
Yep. You'll notice in the bylaw that for most of the fees, you can see two different rates, one with HST and one with just GST. So it will affect us by July 1st in the year.
Okay. By approximately how much?
Well, it'll impact the people paying the fee by the 7%.
An extra 7%?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All in... We're done. Okay. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Next item, item 16, is a report of the City Clerk, and it concerns the 2010 calendar of events and acting mayor schedule. The recommendation is that council approve these two items.
And it's an excellently written report, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Motion? Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Lynch. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 17 concerns the Boulevard Maintenance Amending Bylaw 4080. Recommendations that council give first, second, and third readings to this bylaw.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid.
Well, this is the snow removal one, isn't it? And I got a letter from our engineering department, and I was just delighted to get it. I think I left a message for Mr. Susak. So somehow on our street we're going to have restricted parking, and it's going to be interesting because the street is 1 block long, and one side the driveways go straight up, and the other side the driveways go straight down. So it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to manage parking and on which side of the street, and how people are going to be ticketed, because those are going straight down will never get into their driveways, and those that go straight up will keep falling out. So I don't know how to send out a blanket letter without ever looking at the street is, and I mean, I guess you can't go around and look at every street, but I really think we have to have some common sense here on some of these really hilly areas, because it's just almost impossible to do. So there you go.
Mr. Susak, she says your letter had some ups and downs.
Oh, how tacky.
I'm sorry. Any response from staff? No, I'm sure they'll look into that. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. just responding to Councillor Reid's sort of observation and the challenge, and I've had a flashback to growing up in Montreal and snowstorms that actually had snow drifts up against your front door. And I remember, we lived in a small street of 16 houses, and I remember my dad parking 4 blocks away because we lived on a tiny little cul-de-sac that just didn't get cleared. And that was the reality. Dad had to park where he could and trudge in. He had boots in the car, and like, it was an unhappy situation for everybody, but that was a regular occurrence. And I think we struggle because this is unusual for us. And I really hope that this is not the year for us to get another one of those. But the reality might be that on those really hilly places, you park at the bottom of the hill wherever you can. It might be a church parking lot or a whatever, and you have to walk home. So I think it's about being prepared and making sure that you're properly dressed, and because it could happen.
I'll remind Councillor Robinson that Council passed unanimously a motion that there will be less snow this year.
Right.
Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. During last year's snowfall, I noticed quite a few times kids walking to school, and the snow had covered the sidewalks, so the kids were walking on the road, and obviously very dangerous on roads like Como Lake, where traffic still doesn't slow down for any icy or snow conditions. My question through to Mr. Suzak, though, is if, God forbid, we have another episode like we did last year, what's the city's policy for clearing our sidewalks or sidewalks that citizens aren't responsible for, but pedestrians and kids aren't going to school, etc., still have to use?
Sure.
Mr. Suzak.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Property owners are responsible for clearing their abutting sidewalks. That is a citizen duty in Coquitlam, and it's common in most municipalities. Our practice will be to devote resources where we can on an operational basis to clear those areas that are problematic. Just as you described, there are very high priority roads such as Como Lake, such as Austin, roads that serve schools also. And if we get into a similar situation that we had last year, we will be looking to see what we can do with the resources that we have to try and clear sidewalks when it's feasible. We have already started a Snow Angel program to assist those who are unable to clear their sidewalks. We have had a number of volunteers already registered. We have even had our first few customers, if you will, sign up, and we're in the process of training those volunteers now later on this month. So we feel that we're doing pretty much all that we can at this time. We're certainly hoping for an easier winter than last year because it's important to build up the snow and ice reserve. If we can get a few years of reasonable winters under our belt, we will have a better financial capacity to do more, to clear those sidewalks as we need.
Well, I appreciate that. I just hope, though, that we can lead by example. I did notice last year around schools and high pedestrian traffic areas that there's an awful lot of snow making the sidewalks impassable. And like I say, kids did have to go out onto the streets. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I was really torn when we first discussed this a couple of weeks ago. However, I've come to believe, and after remembering what I saw last year with people walking on the streets, children and adults walking on the streets, I've come to believe that we absolutely need to have this Boulevard Maintenance Amending Bylaw, so I fully support it. I got many emails last winter from people having to duck. They were walking on the road, duck into snowbanks because of traffic going on both sides. winding up at work completely wet, and it just wasn't a very good situation. So I'm going to fully support this for the safety of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
And I also am going to be supporting this bylaw, and I take it to heart when we're talking about our staff are going to enforce this maintenance bylaw if necessary on rare occasions. I certainly don't want to see that we're going out and judiciously going after people when the snow has been redeposited on their sidewalks after the plow's gone by. And I just can't help but say that I doubt that when that happens to the residents, that they're going to say that that happens because the city provides superior service, as noted in the report. And I guess perhaps we're going to have a test of what's going to happen coming this week. I hear there might be some snow coming on Thursday. But either way, it was interesting today. I noticed when I was driving to work this morning that even on today's when it's very, very frosty, there's people who are walking on the roadway instead of the sidewalk because it just happens to be the area that was not as icy. Just a comment.
And I'll join in that. Last year we saw some very dangerous situations. We saw kids walking in the ruts of the SUVs because the sidewalk wasn't available to them, and then stepping out away from the traffic a foot or so while the next SUV passed on the way to school. Clearly, we can't have that. We need better enforcement of the enforcement of the rules related to sidewalks where we can enforce it. But I also I remember at one point driving down Mariner just past Hauser and around the corner. We're a blind corner, and a woman was in the curb lane in front of us, walking with her back to traffic, trying desperately to get down the hill because she couldn't walk on the sidewalk. And I managed to convince her to get in at least the back seat of the car because there was no way that I was going to be driving past this and watch her walk down Mariner. But Mariner was unavailable to pedestrians because, well, there really isn't at that stretch of Mariner, there isn't really a neighboring resident to clear the sidewalk, and so we need to find a solution. If it's not working, we need to find a solution, and this one at least finds a solution. But these kinds of solutions are expensive. This involves having a staff person go out there and shovel something that we traditionally haven't done. So the costs associated with that, we have to keep in mind that those costs are things that Council is weighing as it tries to find the appropriate balance for its budget. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think more than most people, I was out as a transit operator on the road seeing a lot of people walking on roadways, not being able to walk on sidewalks, people in residence not doing their responsibility, I would say, to keep their sidewalks clean, businesses in the Pacific Reach, United Boulevard area, not cleaning the sidewalks, giving people places to go to work or to walk. I think it was pointed out that we just had a budget here where we've been looking at our costs and keeping our costs down. In the report, if we were to rough high-level review indicated clearing and removing snow from the city on sidewalks, if the city was to do it, would cost around $4 million a year, something we clearly can't afford to do. So the responsibility lies with the people and in this bylaw. Now we will, and the bylaw states, and Councillor Lynch, enforcement will remain complaint-driven. Staff will always aim to achieve compliance before ticketing being the last resort. And we always take that action in the city here, trying to get compliance before we ticket. But I think people have to try, and we have to make people to take responsibility. And I think we've talked before about the Snow Angel program for those people that need the help to do it, for the community to come together and help each other, and for the snow work to be done in the neighborhoods. I'm supporting this bylaw because it puts the onus and the responsibility there for the people. Once again, if they choose not to do it and somebody slips and falls, they're going to have some liability and responsibility. But I saw too many people walking down the roadway in very dangerous situations because there was no sidewalk to walk into. And as I mentioned through to Mr. Suzak about possibly getting TransLink to clean out the snow, because they didn't, the bus shelters where people stood to catch the bus weren't even shoveled out and cleaned. We have to work proactively, work with other agencies. But I think by this report shows here, there's a very, very big cost in doing sidewalk cleaning, and at this present time, we've just gone through a budget. We don't have the funds for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The motion before us is the Boulevard Maintenance Amending Bylaw. No other discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 18 is a proposed road cancellation application adjacent to 710 Alderson Avenue. It's Bylaw 4065. Its recommendation is that Council give first, second, and third readings to the Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4065 and directed this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the Community Charter.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Actually, I'm going to speak against this. I have difficulty once again with the we are trying as a council to encourage some more innovative and creative ways of doing land development in the, particularly in the Southwest Area Plan. I think we want to talk to landowners, property owners, developers, and say, really, the way you used to do it, and typically we don't want to do that anymore. The way they used to do it, and a lot of them will tell me this, there's no places left to do duplexes. I've always done duplexes. It's what I do is duplexes. And please let me do a duplex. And we say, well, there's all kinds of other opportunities. Councillor Reid has been one of the advocates of identifying ways that we can put 2 or 3 or even 4 single-family homes on a lot, or coach houses, carriage houses, ways of densifying our community that aren't just the duplex. And here we are being asked to facilitate the development of a duplex that will essentially, I think, I don't think we need to do this. I think the applicant could come to us with some more creative alternatives to a duplex, and then we wouldn't be trying to, having to do a road cancellation and such. This one's about facilitating a duplex when there's other opportunities for that parcel that I think would be a lot more creative, and I'll be voting against it. Any other speakers? Seeing none. All in favor of the road cancellation? Opposed of the road? Councillor Robinson and myself are opposed. The motion carries.
Item 19 concerns the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief, for which our representative is available to respond to questions. The recommendation is that Council receive for information the Board and Brief.
Receipt has been moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have 2 onward transmittal items, which are available at the back in blue. They're marked items 20 and 21. For the benefit of those who are not here to receive copies of these reports, I will read out the title and the fuller recommendations. Item 20 concerns the 2010 Metro Vancouver Board and Committee appointments. The recommendations that Council approve the following appointments. That Mayor Richard Stewart be appointed to the Vancouver Board of Directors with 3 votes, and that Councillor Reid be his alternate. Second, that Councillor Asmussen be appointed to the Metro Vancouver Board of Directors with 3 votes, and that Councillor Lynch be his alternate. That for the Labour Relations Bureau, that Councillor Lynch be the City of Coquitlam representative, and that Councillor Reamer be the alternate. For the Lower Mainland Treaty Advisory Committee, that Councillor Asmussen be the City of Coquitlam representative with Councillor Sikora acting as alternate. That the City convey to Metro Vancouver, City of Coquitlam's interest in having the identified representatives sit on the following standing committees of Metro Vancouver. For the Regional Planning Committee, Mayor Stewart. For the Port Cities Committee, Councillor Lynch. For the Water Committee, Councillor Reid. And recommendation 3, that the City convey to Metro Vancouver Coquitlam's nomination of non-directors alternates to the following standing committees. To the Housing Committee, Councillor Robinson. For the Parks Committee, Councillor McDonnell. And to the Waste Management Committee, Councillor Sikora.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Asmussen. All in favor of the appointments? Opposed? Councillor Reamer is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 21 also concerns council appointments. These are for committees more closely related to the purview of the City of Coquitlam. The first is that Council receive for information the Mayor's appointments to the standing committees identified in the report. That Council approve the appended list of proposed council member appointments to advisory committees, task force, statutory committees, and other identified bodies. And 3, the Council approve the following appointments to the 2010 appointments to the Library Board and the Joint Family Court Youth Justice Committee appointments. And these are as listed on the report in front of you.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. No, on these appointments, I have a little mixed feelings. As I mentioned earlier, the fact is that, I know that I was the land use chairman, which I'm glad that I'm not anymore, because I think it's time that we have 8 council members. And I think it's time that rather than reappointing the same people to chair the committees, I think it's time that we gave each council member a chance to chair it, whether it be new council members or whatever. They can be vice chair, and the third year they should be chairing. In this case, there's 2 council members. They've done a tremendous job on their committees, but I think, however, that's putting them as chairs for the next next year again, and I think it's wrong. I think that some of the council members around this table, I don't know, I know that they're probably a little kind and don't want to speak out too much, but I'll speak out for them. That the fact is, he's a Councillor Lynch. Been on a council for what, 9 years? Why couldn't he chair one of the committees? Certainly he's got a lot of world of experience. So, those are things that my comments are. There's certainly Councillor Selena Robinson that could have chaired one of the committees. Certainly Councillor Reid, I'm glad she's taken over the land use committee. But Councillor Reimer also, that, over a period of course of 3 years, Mayor, I feel that every council member should have a chance. But in this case, they won't. Okay? Thank you. So that's my displeasure with those appointments. Outside of that, it's okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Worship. That is the final formal item on the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson. Seconded by Councillor Reid for adjournment. All in favor? Opposed? No one's opposed. No one's opposed. Carried. Thank you very much.